ordinary story. What we have is we have Judas, the disciple who betrayed Jesus, had died. Actually, just a little bit earlier in the chapter, we are told that he swelled up and his guts poured out. They're making the point that Judas wasn't the most beloved person anymore. But his position as one of the apostles was extremely important in the early church. It was essential that they have 12 apostles, because they were the new church. They were the new Israel. And these 12 apostles symbolized the 12 tribes of the kingdom. Their job was to serve as witnesses in the community to Christ. They represented the traditional foundation, the grounding from which this new era was going to spring forth in the world. And Peter stood up among this crowd of 120 people gathered around, and he said, "Let another take Judas's position. The only requirement was that they had to have been with Jesus from the very beginning. They had to have been with Jesus when he was baptized, all the way through the ascension." And two names were put forth. The first was Barsabbas, who was also known as Joseph, called Barsabbas, who was also known as Justus. Got it? It was three names, one guy. The other person they put forth was Matthias. And the method that they selected to use was very interesting. They first started off with prayer. "Lord, you know everyone's heart. Show us which one of these two you have chosen." And what they did at that point was they took just a regular rock, or sometimes a piece of wood, and they would write Barsabbas on the first rock. And they took a second rock and they wrote Matthias on the second rock. And then they would shake the bowl, and whichever one fell out first. Matthias. That's the new apostle. Pretty interesting, don't you think? I kind of find it appealing. I mean, just think about the decisions we make at this church. How much easier it would be. Oh, Mary Lynn, who should we have on session? Art. You're on session. All right. Who's going to be playing the drums with Rob up front? So, Betty, come on down. But of course, the most important question for us this summer is, who's going to paint Bill's office while he's away? No one. Alright. Glad we got it. I learned from the first service, you didn't hire the smartest pastor because I used a glass bowl during the first service to and it broke right after I asked the question of who's going to paint Bill's office. The rock shot out. Well, in this case, we have the 12th apostle that was nominated. It was Matthias. And he was nominated, he was endorsed, he was approved, and he was called, all in the span of just a few minutes. With the election of a person for such an important position, you'd think that Matthias' name would come to mind when we talk about the great call stories in the Bible, wouldn't you? You'd think it would come to mind. But I'm guessing for most of us, Matthias doesn't leap off of our tongues. I mean, let's be honest here. Matthias, his call story was nothing like Moses in the burning bush. or Mary and the visiting angel, or Paul and the blinding light. Those were called stories. Have any of you seen Moulin Rouge? You know that song, Spectacular, Spectacular. The Spectacular, Spectacular were the call stories of Moses and Mary, not Matthias. Matthias, in fact, he kind of faded out. We don't hear about him, actually we don't hear about him before this point in the Bible. We don't hear him any time later in the Bible. Other than the way that he was elected, it was completely ordinary. I'm sure he would have loved a spectacular, just as much as we would love that today. But just like Matthias, we're more likely to receive an ordinary call in our lives. Things like setting up for communion, or putting together the PowerPoint, teaching Sunday school, serving on the PTA board, working a regular old 9-to-5 job. You know, the one foot in front of the other types of call. That's what we're more likely to get. God tends to call us to ordinary ministry. It's not flashy, and it's not something that's going to grab the headlines, but it's our calling. As followers of Christ, we are each beckoned to participate in God's unfolding kingdom of love in this world. Now, I'm guessing that we don't hear much more about Apostle number 12 because he probably did his job. He probably witnessed to the life of Jesus. Dean Stanley writes, "The true calling of a Christian is not to do extraordinary things, but to do ordinary things in an extraordinary way." For me, that speaks to the quality with which we live our lives. Not the heights that we achieve or the titles that we can put on our resume. The quality with which we live our lives. Do we love our neighbors unconditionally? Even those that get on our nerves. Do we love them unconditionally? Do we welcome people into this congregation with an eagerness to learn who they are? Do we interact with the marginalized, whether that's because of age or disability or addiction or illness or anything else? Do we interact with them with an understanding that I'm here with you? I'm in this with you. In what ways are we witnessing to Christ's abundant love in the world? In other words, are we doing the ordinary with God's love as our guiding principle? These are the types of questions that we can and probably should be asking every day in our lives, regardless if they are extreme